As well as stinky hygiene practices, plagues, and farming, the medieval era was known for some truly weird weaponry. Across the era, humans developed interesting and inventive ways of poking holes in each other, and some were more gruesome than you might expect. Welcome to a day in history. Number 1. The man-catcher. No, it's not quite as much fun as it sounds. The man-catcher wasn't a medieval way of claiming your man, but instead a large pole weapon with a spiky circular head. Dating from medieval Europe to the 18th century, the man-catcher allowed the ring to pass around a man-sized hole and keep whatever was inside of it trapped, painfully. They were used either to pull nobles from their horses and trap them for ransom, or to restrain dangerous criminals on the street until the local police could cart them off to jail. There's not a huge amount of information available on the man-catcher, suggesting it wasn't necessarily a super popular weapon choice, but for the name alone, it deserves a spot in the weirdest medieval weapons list. 2. The bagnak. The bagnak was a medieval weapon that originated in India, although the exact time period it was in use from is unknown. We do know, however, that it was used throughout the medieval era and later into the early modern. The easiest way to describe the bagnak is as an earlier cousin of knuckle dusters. Literally translated from Hindi, it means tiger's claw. This was because it usually consisted of 4 to 5 curved blades fixed to metal to form a dangerous slashing claw that could be worn over someone's knuckles. The most famous historical use of the bagnak was by the ruler of the Indian subcontinent, Maharashtra Shivaji Bhonsle I in the 1600s. At the time of Shivaji's rise to power, he was just 16 years old. Over the course of 2 years between 1646 and 1648, the tempestuous young leader took control of several important forts and challenged several ruling sultans for control. Unsurprisingly, they weren't too fond of this, and as the previously shaky Bijapur Sultanate stabilized, they looked to how they could get rid of Shivaji, who had already claimed parts of their land. In 1657, renowned veteran General Afzal Khan was sent to arrest the younger man and desecrate the temple that his family held as holy. Shivaji soon found himself holed up in his Pratagad fort, and the two men found their armies at a stalemate. So Khan suggested to Shivaji that just the two of them meet and settle the issue face to face. That turned out to be a big mistake for Afzal Khan. Although historical records are unclear on what happened next, there are 2 things that are certain. 1. That Shivaji was stabbed by Khan in the struggle, and 2. He in turn successfully disemboweled Khan using the bagnak. Shivaji emerged the slightly wounded victor. Number 3. The flying crow with magic fire. The flying crow with magic fire sounds more like it's out of Game of Thrones than actual history, but this bizarre form of weaponry truly existed and was written about in the HUOLONGJING, a Chinese military treatise written regarding warfare in the early Ming dynasty. HUOLONGJING translates as the Fire Drake Manual or Fire Dragon Manual, which, let's face it, is one of the coolest names you could give a manual. The flying crow with magic fire isn't the only badass weaponry found inside its pages either. The whole thing is full of inventive and terrifying ways you can employ fire for warfare, from the well-known flaming arrow to the early fire rockets that would send multiple explosive blasts sailing through the air. But the weirdest, slightly comical and most disturbing of all was, of course, the crow. We want to clarify here, this wasn't actually a real crow. Instead, it was a bird-shaped rocket made from bamboo or reeds. Its wings helped the projectile travel longer distances and was used to attack stationary or slow-moving targets. The crow was powered by rockets on its back that sent it flying through the air, packed with either explosives, poisonous smoke, or caltrops, among other weaponry. Imagine that being the last thing you see. Number 4. The spring-loaded triple dagger. Also known as the parrying dagger, the spring-loaded triple dagger was a small handheld weapon from the late medieval era, predominantly used in Europe. Usually, the dagger was kept on one person as a backup weapon, ready to pull out and stab your enemy should you lose your primary weapon, which was usually a sword. What makes this dagger weird, though, is that it had 2 extra components either side of the main stabby bit. It initially first appeared in the early 1500s, and quickly people realized how good it was as a defensive weapon. The additional prongs allowed you to stave off the sharp end coming towards you far more easily than with a normal dagger or sword. The cool part is that it looks like a traditional dagger until a button or lever is pushed on the side of the hilt to spring it open into 3 prongs like a trident that King Titus would carry. Although King Titus probably didn't use his trident for stabbing like medieval people used the spring-loaded triple dagger. Number 5. The gun shield. Now a popular feature in shooting games like Call of Duty, one of the most famous and only surviving versions of the early gun shield can be visited in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, UK. The gun shield belonged to 16th century ruler Henry VIII, and 5 more Italian versions were gifted to him and found aboard the ship the Mary Rose. The most popular consensus is that they were offered to Henry VIII by an Italian painter named Giovan Battista. In total, there were 46 surviving examples of the early gun shield, thanks to Henry VIII's apparent penchant for collecting the weapon. The gun shield was a pretty cool weapon that you might not have expected to exist in medieval Europe, as it was pretty advanced for its time. Its design, though, was actually pretty simple. Gun shields were some variation of a shield and gun melded together for an ultimate combination of attack and defense in one weapon. There'd be some sort of sighting hole and multiple pistols encased within the weapon. But generally, historians agree there are 2 versions of the gun. A heavy English version, most likely used in a stationary fashion on warships or the back of horse carts, and an Italian version that was far more lightweight and could be carried into the battlefield by an individual. Number 6. The medieval war cart. The medieval war cart or wagon was basically a much larger version of the gun shield that could be dragged along the battlefield. It was usually a heavy cart with multiple slits through protective shielded sides that could be used to fire arrows or pistols through and launch cannons from behind. Originally developed in 1420 during the Hussite Wars, the cart doesn't seem too weird until you learn that some variations also contained ankle mangling spurs to wound unarmed and unaware enemies that got too close. Do you enjoy learning about weird weapons, smelly peasants, and human sacrifices? Subscribe to A Day in History for access to the strange and horrifying parts of history that others miss.